Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Good morning, everyone. Today I am going to begin a series of 20 lectures on the topic economy and society in contemporary India. I begin this topic with my own approach. Rather, it's not my approach, it's the approach of sociologists and anthropologists. While we are going to study the economy, we are going to study the economy from a sociological and anthropological perspective. So, don't expect me to talk about the issues that economists raise, although I should say whatever the economists deal with are very important for us as sociologists. In my view, it's our approach transcends economics, the discipline of economics, because we are looking at economists also as actors, as social actors who are influencing social various policy decisions. Having said that, my main interest in studying the relationship between economy and society is because of my concern with development. It's not just my concern, it is a national concern in a very important way. Right from the year 1947, when we became independent, we have been talking about development. And even today, our Prime Minister came to, got his massive majority in the Parliament. The BJP got massive majority in the Parliament, mainly because of the fact that his agenda was development. He went on to say, for him, development is sabke saath, sabka vikas. Now, this kind of proclamation that we want development, various successive governments have been making these proclamations that we want development so that our country becomes a developed nation in the world. Now, it is no doubt that India has the potential for economic development. And today, if you look at the statistics that are available, today you will find that India has already become a major global actor in terms of its economic performance. India is now the 7th largest economy in the world, and it is said that in this year, that is 2018, India is going to jump into the 5th position. That means India will be the 5th largest economy in the world. What does it mean to say that India is the largest economy in the world? How does it affect us? It affects not just us, it affects the whole world. This is because India is the largest economy, in terms of sheer amount of wealth that we have, we can buy goods from all over the world. So, countries that want to export goods to our country will look for opportunities to buy goods, to sell goods to India. And actually nowadays, since the world economies are not doing very well, especially those of the developed countries, except per that of the USA and to some extent Germany, several economies are going through recession. That means their economic growth rates are slowing down. India can play a very important role because it can generate demand for other economies to improve their economic growth, to expand their economic activities and improve their and achieve faster rate of growth, more rapid rate of growth. So, that means India can literally lift other recessionary economies from their morass of stagnation or recession, or when the economies are going down, their the economic growth rates are slowing down. India can, by demanding their products, India can ensure that those economies also develop, and their people also, the people in those countries are also employed. So, India plays a very large, just because India is the largest economy in the world, one of the largest economies in the world, India will play a very important role in the fate of other economies in this world. That is one thing. And also India has a potential for another reason. India is not only the largest economy, it has the potential for rapid economic growth, which will fuel economic growth throughout the world, because we will be asking for, if we have rapid economic growth, we will also buy more and more, we will be in a position to buy more and more goods from other parts of the world. So, in that way also India is in India's position is that of a big player in the global economy. That's why can India, how is it that India has the potential for rapid economic growth, you may ask. That is for a simple reason, what we call that is because of what we call the demographic dividend. It is expected that in the 2020s, that is in the coming decade, India will have the largest number of young people, the largest proportion of young people in its population. That means, you see, when young people are the proportion of young people in the population is high, that means that there are more workers. That means that the dependency ratio, that is the number of people that are dependent on the young people, will be less. So, that means that India will be able to, will have the potential to employ more and more people. The working force will be ready to work in new industries, and because of that, many investors, foreign investors will be interested, both foreign investors and Indian private enterprises will be interested in investing in our country. Supposing in a country where the people, the dependents are more than the number of the proportion of dependents is more than the number of the younger people, then that means there will be those economies will suffer slower economic growth rate, because there will be no school, the schools will have to shut down, or many of the and of course, healthcare centers for old people may come up, but those economies will need people from the other parts of the world to come and work. This is what is happening in many of the developed countries of Europe, because the number of older people is increasing so much, and the number of younger people to take care of the older people and to provide services for the older people is diminishing so much that they have to depend on other countries to get and import workers from there. So, in this context, the fact that India has a demographic dividend, as they call it, is weighs in favor of India becoming a very important global economy. But in spite of that, there are some people who are cynical, who are critics of Indian economy. They say that true, India has become one of the largest economies in the world, but is that really development? We say that India is developing, our GDP, gross domestic product, is growing at the rate of, now it is less than 7%, but according to the reports available, the Economic Survey of India, the latest economic survey that has been published in 2018, very recently, there is hope that our economy will grow at the rate of over 8% in the subsequent years. Now, this being the case, one can say that the situation for India is very optimistic, but then people say that we have to be careful, because this development that we are witnessing is a peculiar kind of development. That is because there is inequality in the country. Some people say inequalities of income and wealth are increasing in the country day by day. There is polarization, the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. One of the latest figures available from the Oxfam, that is a England-based, UK-based institution which is working for the poor and providing aid to the countries to remove poverty. The Oxfam has said that 1%, that is, out of every 100 people, 1 person in the country has wealth to the extent of 73% of the country's total wealth. That means 1% of the people have 73% of the total wealth. That means that the remaining 99 out of 100 people, let's assume that one person's income is, our wealth is about rupees 1 lakh. All right, the wealth of the country, I am giving you just a simple example. The wealth of the country is rupees 1 lakh. All right, out of that wealth, and let's assume that there are only 100 people in our country. Out of that 1 lakh, if one person owns 73,000 rupees of wealth, what does it mean? The remaining 99 people have to share only 27,000 rupees. That means they will have less than 27,000 rupees by 99. You can imagine they will get less than 300 rupees per person as wealth. All right. So, this means there is steep inequalities, and they say that if development has to gain any meaning, then we should make sure that there is this economic inequalities are bridged, and that the poor also become richer even as the rich grow rich, so that the gap, the rich may grow richer, but the poor may also have to, if the poor also become rich, then it's likely that everyone will gain from development. Of course, there is the other thesis that when development occurs, actually there is a huge bulge, like people having a big tummy or population profile will be like this, that there will be only a few people at the top and a few people at the bottom who are poor, but the middle class, those in the middle, will be the largest in the economy. That is what they say will happen with rapid economic development. But recently, the economists and statisticians are saying that inequalities all over the world is increasing, and so is it the case in the context of India. Besides inequalities, if you want to understand the extent of poverty in our country, there are some indices available which bring out very poignantly the kind of poverty that we are facing. Apart from economic inequality, another measure for assessing the inequality in our country is what is called the hunger index. Hunger index, in fact, gives you an idea of the intensity of poverty in the country, in any country for that matter. And there is an institute called the Food Policy Research Institute based in Germany, which has been collecting data on hunger, on the extent of hunger in different parts of the world. According to this institute, the hunger index in India in 2017 was 31.4, and India is classified as the 100th in a list of 119 countries for which data were collected, and according to this institute ranks India as one of the serious countries suffering from incidents of hunger. It has been estimated that 1 out of every 10 babies between 6 and 23 months gets adequate diet. That means out of every 10 babies above the age of 6 months, and between the age of 6 months and 23 months, out of every 10 babies, 9 babies do not get enough nutrition. Only 1 baby gets the nutrition that is required. And according to this an organization called India Spend, it was found that 35% of our children, that is those who are below 5 years, are underweight. And to substantiate this data further, the infant mortality rate in India stands at 34. That is, out of every 1,000 infants that are born in the country, that infants are between the month of from the time they are born to the time they to 1 year age, to the time they become 1 year old. These infants out in India, the infant mortality rate is 34 per every 1,000 births in a given year. This is very high. In fact, many of the countries, including Bangladesh and many countries in Africa, which are poorer than us, have a lower infant mortality rate. In India, only Kerala has infant mortality rates that's comparable to the most developed countries of the world, with only 10 deaths per every 1,000 births, 10 infant deaths per every 1,000 births. According to the statistics available, Madhya Pradesh with 47 for every 1,000, Rajasthan with 41, Odisha with 44, and Uttar Pradesh with 43, stand as the states which have a high infant mortality rate. That means, infant mortality rate means that infants, you see, we need to clarify this issue a little. You see, between the month of, from the time that the baby is born, for the first 6 months, mother's milk is adequate nutrition for the baby. They survive. But after they reach the 6th month, from 6th month to 23 months, they need more nutrition from outside. Mother's milk alone is not sufficient. Now, the fact that infants die, that means that they are not getting enough nutrition to combat diseases. Even in that, there is a very interesting thing, that interesting point that needs to be noted, that is that the female sex, that is the women, are much more resistant, have natural biological resistance to diseases and so on. And actually, female babies should survive more than the male babies, because male babies are more vulnerable to infections and disease and so on, whereas female babies are not that much vulnerable. That's their constitutionally they are stronger. As we all know, there is this practice of female infanticide in India. That is that if the parents come to know that the infant is a female, they would rather like to they'll rather start neglecting the girl child, because because in India there is preference for male children, son preference. This is called son preference. This is not just in India, even in China there is this practice of son preference. The parents, this is cultural. Parents prefer sons rather than daughters, and when girl children are born, they tend to neglect their health, they tend to neglect giving them good nutritious food, as a result of which these girl children die. The Indian government has banned ultrasound of pregnant women to determine whether the fetuses are male and female or female, because if it used to be the case that using this ultrasound, many parents would opt for abortion if the fetus turned out to be female. That is why Indian government has banned it. We all know that. And in India, if you another interesting point about Indian society is that normally, because as I said that women are more resistant, women tend to live longer at every age level, except when they are in the reproductive age. Women tend to live longer than men. Women, as elder women tend to have a longer age span than men. As I was saying, women have a more sturdy constitution than men. So, women, their lifespan is longer than that of men. Therefore, in any country, the sex ratio, that is the number of women per 1,000 males, should be in favor of women. That means, for every 1,000 men, there should be more than 1,000 women. That is, for every 1,000 males, there should be more than 1,000 females. But in India, because of the practice of son preference, we find that there are only, according to the 2011 census, we only have 943 women for every 1,000 males. So, this itself is a very interesting point, that our country, our economy has bloated up, has become large. We have registered rapid economic growth, yet there is this abysmal poverty, yet our infants are dying in greater numbers than infants in countries which are poor, and we find that there is women are not getting adequate nutrition. That is why, and not just in adequate nutrition, women, because of the practice of infant mortality, because of our prejudices against women, we find that women do not get sufficient nutrition. And there is a this is why we say that this patriarchy in our country is an institution which affects the future generations. It affects the future generations for yet another reason. We want sons, all right. We have son preference. We want sons. We think that our sons will carry our names forward and will bring us glory, bring glory to all of us. But if we neglect women's nutrition, the kind of children that are born are also going to be vulnerable in terms of health. Now, it is according to one of the studies that has come forth, the nutritional level in the country, especially of children, is so poor that some children do not have the capacity. Their health has become so bad that they do not have the capacity to absorb nutrition, even if you pump nutrition into their bodies. Even if you give them nutritious food, what happens is that their bodies do not have the capacity to absorb the additional nutrition. This is because once they, this diarrhea, many of our children suffer from chronic diarrhea. That means whatever they have eaten, is not absorbed by the body. As a consequence of which, what will happen is that the children grow into stunted adults. Their mental capacity also gets affected. All right, we talked about our demographic dividend. We have a large workforce, and some people say we are also the more educated and most skilled workforce. We can enter we can join modern manufacturing industries, IT and so on, and we have excellent scientific personnel available. So our country will grow by leaps and bounds. But actually, if we are producing a generation of children with no adequate nutrition, we will end up by producing a large population, a large proportion of our population will be stunted, not just in terms of physical height and weight, but they will also be stunted in terms of their mental capacities. So, when you talk about development, we should also talk about what kind of development. What is very puzzling is that all our governments, successive governments, all right, have been wedded to the idea of development such that poverty is eliminated, such that there is greater equality. If you look at all the statements by all the prime ministers and of the country, the planners, the policy makers of the country, you will find that they not only want development, our policy makers not only want development, they want development with equality. I would say that when Prime Minister Modi talks about development, and when he talks about Sabke Saath, Sabka Vikas, he is talking about a kind of development which will lift all of us, all the population into higher standards of life and more meaningful and richer and prosperous life. And this is also another way of talking about equality. Now, before this, in the UPA government, they had this slogan, inclusive growth. Inclusive growth means there should not only be rapid economic growth, along with it, more and more people should enjoy the benefits of rapid economic growth, so that they can also share the wealth. And during Indira Gandhi's time, Indira Gandhi was the leader who popularized this term, Garibi Hatao. She wanted to directly attack poverty. This is also one version of equality. And during the Nehruvian era, when Indian government accepted the socialist pattern of society as the goal, a society in which there will be a society which is casteless and classless, the slogan was growth with distributive justice. So, if you look at all the agenda of all the governments, you find that they have laid emphasis not just on development per se. They said that economic growth is important, but they also say development means economic growth with equality. Of course, they define equality in different ways. And one of the things that I will be discussing, one of the issues that I will be discussing is the entire career of this notion of equality in India, because I think, I argue that it is this notion of equality, is this discourse, the debate on equality that has been set off by our democracy, which makes us, which has ensured that India remains as a united nation state. So, even if although all governments want growth with equality, why is it that it's not been possible for these governments, for us, why blame only the government, for us to ensure that these noble intentions are translated into practice? That is the question that I will try to answer in this series of lectures that I am going to present before you. This is one of the major issues that we will be talking about. The point is that when you ask this question, why is it that the government does not translate what they intended into practice? One answer can be the government doesn't really mean what it says. It only says that in order to collect votes. All right? That is a kind of attributing motivations to the government. But I think from the perspective of sociologists and anthropologists, we can't be satisfied by attributing evil motives to policymakers. We will have to ask, why is it that we are although I do not want to submit to I do not want to accept the proposition that all our policy makers have evil intentions. It is this question that is raised that policy makers have evil intentions is not the answer that's given, that policy makers have evil intentions, is not a valid answer, because this leads on to another question. If the policy makers are evil, why did we elect them in the first place? So there must be some deeper systemic issues involved, and that is what I am interested in. What is it about our society that brings up people of a certain type who are, for varieties of reasons, who are not able to translate what they say into practice. For this, sociologically, the sociologists look at make a distinction. When we are studying society, we make a distinction between what is called social structure and what is called culture. Social structure is about social relationships. That is, that the way we relate ourselves to others, whether while we are at work, whether we are at home, whether we are in offices, or even when we are enjoying when we are enjoying our leisure. The way we relate ourselves to friends, with the way we relate ourselves to our co-workers, the way we relate ourselves to our members of the family, and so on, are very important. This constitutes the social structure. That is, in other words, family, is part, the institution of the family is part of the social structure, and this family interacts with caste, because our we still the number of we look for our brides and grooms within our caste, and caste is a very important event in our life cycle rituals, and caste is also in very many ways very important politically. And we, apart from these institutions of caste and family, we also if you look at what I am saying when I am talking about social relations, these are patterns of relationships that emerge. I may have I may deal with one friend differently from another. I may deal with my wife. I may have a different kind of relationship with my wife than somebody else may have with his wife. All right, marital, relationships have their own peculiarities, but at the same time, these relationships have a set of duties, obligations, and rights. And it is these duties and obligations which are recognized by society that constitute social relations. So, when we are talking about social relation, when we are talking about social structure, we are talking about these social relations which are patterned. And it is this, when we ask this question, why is it that there is this, our economic growth has been tilted in favor of only the rich? The point is that we should ask this question, what pattern of relationships emerge in our society? Not, in all spheres of life, both in working time as well as in leisure time. Apart from that, that is social structure for you. Apart from social structure, some people, there are sociologists who regard social structure as very important. There are sociologists who have studied the caste system in detail, and then they say that it is because of the caste system that India is what it is, and India is where it is in terms of development. There are others who say that this is not enough. It is also our culture that is important, right? They say that the value systems that we have, the values and the way in which we express ourselves are also very important. That is, what ideas, what ideologies, what religions, affect us. We can take our religion very seriously, all right. So, there is something wrong with our religion, all right, that makes us, adopt certain types of attitudes. What is it in our religion which says, which tolerates poverty? When there is a beggar walking in the streets, what is it in our society, that makes us ignore? Why are we different to poverty, to misery? All right. These are they try to answer these questions by saying, well, there must be something wrong with our religion. No, we are more we are more inclined to attain our own salvation, or attain moksha, and therefore we don't bother about others. Each one, and also one can say that each one has his karma. If somebody is suffering, it is because of his karma. What can we do? We can't do very much. Anyway, I am not saying that this is it. This is the right explanation. But those who talk in terms of, this is just an example that I am giving to say that those who talk in terms of culture, they say it is culture that affects our work ethic, the way we look at the way we relate to our others, and so on. Therefore, it is culture that is more important. In the course of these lectures, we will try to pay attention to both social structure and culture. By the way, there are very many, what shall I say, explanations offered both regarding social structure and regarding culture. As I said, I will just give you two broad, ways of approach, two broad ways in which people have approached this problem. Some of those who look at social structure, they say caste is such a, of course, Dr. Ambedkar said that caste is such an oppressive system that unless we eliminate, abolish the caste system, India cannot progress. Some others say caste is okay, but more than caste, it is class that matters. It is the position, economic position of a person, the person is placed in, whether he is in the position of a landless laborer, or is he in a position of a worker in a factory who has to follow the coercion of work that is imposed on him by the factory owner who is who owns the property of the factory, the machines and all that in the factory. That is class relations. So, there are some people who say it is because of our class relations, exploitative class relations. I will explain what exploitation is subsequently. That it is some people argue it is because of the class relations our economy is we are in such a state, our development is not really conducive. It is we argue, those who talk about class relations, they say that because of the exploitative nature of our class relations, our economy is stumbling, and there is great our inequalities are growing, whereas others say that more important than class is caste. It is the caste structure that is hemming our economy from growing in a way that it also ensures social justice. Whereas those who emphasize, who talk about culture and values, they say that there is something wrong in, some of them they say that there is something wrong in Hinduism. Hinduism, is otherworldly. It doesn't really enthuse people to take risks and go into new areas and develop and innovate, find out new methods of production. We are not technologically oriented, where our technology is all technology of the spirit and of our soul. Therefore, and we want to attain moksha. So, this kind of an approach will not is not conducive for promoting enterprises, promoting entrepreneurship, and for promoting work ethic. In fact, many of these people who talk about culture, they say that we don't have, our Hinduism is such that we don't have a work culture. We don't believe in working hard. We don't believe in achieving big things in society, in life. In this introductory lecture, my interest has been to look at the relationship between economy and society, or rather to stress that we will be discussing in the course of these 20 lectures the relationship that obtains between economy and society in contemporary India. While we are going to discuss the relationship between economy and society, we cannot help talk about the idea of development, because after all, development has been the agenda, economic development has been the agenda of the country for the last 70 years, ever since we became independent. And in order to ensure development, we want to see how society affects, or rather in another way, we want to study how development affects society and how society in turn is affecting development. That is, we are going to we are interested in studying how the economy impacts on society and also how the society impacts on the economy. We pointed out in this lecture that while development, economic growth is important, equally our social goals are also important. And I have tried to point out that all the successive governments in our country ever since independence have been stressing on not just economic development, but also on equality. Although the way they talk about equality, the way they define equality differs from one set of policymakers to another. And while discussing this issue of development and equality, we also try to understand how can we study the relationship between economy and society. In doing this, I stressed that sociologists look at two notions. They talk about social structure on the one hand and they talk about culture on the other. Some sociologists place importance on what is called social structure, which is a set of patterned social relationships in working in a given society. Others talk about culture and they give importance on the role of values and the way the values determine our relationships and therefore our economic performance as well. I have given you examples from some of the interpretations that sociologists have offered in the context of both. Some sociologists have talked about the importance of caste and others have talked about the importance of class in order to understand why the quality of our growth is what it is, whereas those who stress on culture, they say that they find that there are some things there are some basic orientation in our religion that stymies economic growth.